Welcome to our channel. We'd be thrilled if you'd give this video a like and subscribe for more compelling stories. This is a tale of prejudice exposed and redemption earned. A black man, mocked and dismissed, steps into a corporate battlefield as the new CEO, wielding a 10-millimeter steel. Through Malcolm's resolve and Greg's transformation, witness a clash of arrogance and accountability that reshapes a company and its people. Stay until the end to see justice unfold. They laughed when he walked in, mocking his suit, questioning his presence, telling him this floor wasn't for his kind. One even asked if he'd brought their lunch, but they didn't know the man they were humiliating. The black man they tried to push out was about to change their lives forever. This isn't just corporate drama. It's what happens when arrogance meets accountability, when prejudice invades power and crumbles. You're not watching a success story. You're watching an expose. Stay until the end to see what happens when justice steps into a room that underestimated it. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. What do you think happens next? For more real stories that flip expectations and shatter assumptions, hit that like button, subscribe, and join the conversation. The revolving doors hissed softly as James Carter stepped into the lobby of Sterling and Hart Global's headquarters in downtown Chicago. Morning light streamed through tall glass panels, casting sharp shadows on the polished marble floor. Everything about the space screamed wealth and power. Brushed silver trim, sleek black granite columns, a faint citrus scent from cleaning oil, and the low hum of quiet authority. James, 42, walked with calm resolve, his polished Oxfords clicking with each measured step. His charcoal gray suit was impeccable, tailored to perfection, and he carried a slim leather briefcase in his left hand. This was an arena he'd mastered long ago, navigating with practiced control. But experience had taught him control didn't always mean respect. How many times have I been here before? He thought, his jaw tightening. Another lobby, another set of eyes assuming I don't belong. Why do I always have to prove I'm worthy of standing here? Flashback. 20 years ago, a younger James sat in a cramped office in Atlanta, his first job out of college. A manager had tossed his report in the trash, smirking, "Stick to data entry, kid. Strategy's not for you." The sting of that moment, the weight of being dismissed without a glance, had forged a steel core in him. Each slight since, every raised eyebrow, every "you must be lost," had piled onto that fire, burning away doubt, leaving only resolve. Now, standing in this Chicago tower, he felt the familiar weight of those memories, the exhaustion of fighting the same battle again. "I'm tired," he admitted silently. "Tired of justifying my existence, but I'm not done." At the reception desk, a wide crescent of white marble, a lone employee sat, typing. James nodded politely, his voice firm. "Good morning. I'm here for the 9 a.m. briefing on the 32nd floor." The receptionist, Teresa, didn't flinch. Her acrylic nails tapped rhythmically on the keyboard, her eyes glued to the screen, its glow reflecting in her glasses. James waited. When no response came, he spoke again, louder. "Excuse me, I'm here for the executive briefing." Still nothing. Teresa's silence was a wall, her face blank, as if he were invisible. Same game, different day, James thought, his chest tightening with suppressed anger. They see me, but they don't. Not really. Before he could repeat himself, A figure approached, a security guard in a dark uniform, moving with slow purpose. His badge read, Kincaid. In his mid-50s, stocky, pale, with a buzz cut, Kincaid carried an air of authority in his stride. He didn't ask questions or introduce himself. Stopping a few feet away, he spoke in a calm but commanding tone. "Sir, deliveries are around back. This entrance is for corporate personnel only." James turned to face him, caught off guard not by the words, but by how quickly the assumption had formed. He glanced at his suit, then his briefcase, then back at Kincaid. Deliveries. The word echoed, pulling up another memory. A New York conference where a delegate mistook him for a valet, tossing him car keys. He'd smiled then, handed them back, but the humiliation lingered. Now he kept his voice even. "I'm not here to deliver anything. I'm here for a meeting." Kincaid's eyes narrowed, as if the statement needed decoding. "This is a restricted area," he said flatly. "You'll need to exit through the main entrance and check in at the vendor desk." James didn't move. "My name is James Carter," he said. "I was invited. 9-hole Executive Wing." Kincaid didn't blink. "Maybe so," he said, gesturing toward the revolving doors. "Protocol says deliveries go around. You'll wait there." James let the silence stretch a second too long, his gaze flicking to Teresa, who still hadn't acknowledged him. The guard's hand rested casually on his radio, a subtle hint of escalation. This again, James thought, gripping his briefcase tighter. Every time it's the same. A black man in a suit, and they demand a reason for my existence. "Want to see the invitation?" he asked, voice steady. "I've got the email right here." Kincaid didn't answer, just inhaled slowly. James didn't reach for his phone. Not yet. The lobby hummed behind him, clicking heels and elevators ding, muted conversations. But in this marble corner, time slowed. James stepped back, turning toward the leather chairs in the vendor waiting area. Unmarked, but understood. He didn't sit. He checked his watch. 8:49. 11 minutes until the meeting that would set Sterling and Hart's course for the next fiscal year. He wasn't just attending, he was leading it. Squaring his shoulders, he walked past Teresa without a word, heading for the elevators, scanning the directory for the executive wing. As he pressed the call button, 3 men in crisp suits rounded the corner, laughing too loudly, coffee cups in hand, lanyards swinging. They slowed, spotting James, their chatter fading. One muttered, "Someone order a courier?" The others snickered, not bothering to lower their voices. James turned his head slightly, his gaze cold and unyielding, but he said nothing. The tallest, a redhead with a smug grin, stepped forward. "Hey, you lost. This floor's for senior execs." His tone dripped with false helpfulness. "Kitchen staff's through the service elevator." His friends laughed again, bolder now. They think this is a game, James thought, his pulse quickening. They always do. "I know exactly where I'm going," he said calmly. "Do you?" The redhead blinked, thrown by the quiet challenge. Before he could respond, a new figure cut through the hallway like a blade. Greg Sanders, 45, Director of Strategic Partnerships, radiating entitlement with every step. His slicked back hair and clenched jaw screamed perpetual disapproval. He stopped short, spotting James. "Can I help you?" he snapped, not curious but confrontational. "I'm James Carter," James replied, "here for the 9 executive briefing." Greg didn't offer a handshake or nod, His eyes raked over James, shoes, collar, dark skin, deciding he didn't belong. "Who invited you?" Greg asked, tilting his head as if James had wandered in off the street. "Was there some open house event I wasn't told about?" One of the suited men chuckled. James kept his tone professional. "I was invited by Mr. Callahan's office. I'm consulting on the Triad acquisition." Greg's brow arched, his mouth twitching into a smirk. "Right," he said slowly, unconvinced. "Listen, we don't bring in outside consultants without clearance, especially for internal strategy briefings. If you're here for vendor contracts or IT, that's the second floor." He's enjoying this, James thought, anger flaring. He thinks he's untouchable. "I'm not with facilities," James said, his voice sharpening, "and I'm not a vendor." "You sure about that?" Greg asked, his tone now openly patronizing. "Because I've run these briefings for 5 years, and we don't outsource the thinking to—" He trailed off, the implication heavy. James didn't flinch. "You might want to check with your chief strategy officer before making assumptions," he said. Greg snorted. "I don't need to check with anyone. I know every name on the guest list, and yours isn't on it." The redhead muttered, "Maybe he's shadowing someone, like an intern. That'd make more sense." Greg nodded, flashing a fake smile. "Unfortunately, we don't run internship programs through the executive elevator. Company policy." The others laughed, freer now, confident no consequences would follow. James stared at Greg, unblinking. "It's always interesting," he said quietly, "how quickly some people reveal who they are." Greg's smile widened, mistaking the comment for surrender. "Tell you what, why don't I have someone escort you back to security? They can figure out where you're supposed to be." As he reached for his phone, a voice cut through. "Mr. Carter." A young woman in a sharp blazer hurried from a side corridor, tablet in hand. "Sorry I'm late. We're expecting you upstairs. Conference room 12. Greg froze mid-dial, color draining from his face. The woman nodded politely at him. "Greg, this is Mr. Carter, invited as lead consultant on the Triad deal, board initiated." James said nothing. Greg stepped forward stiffly, his face neutral. But as they reached the elevator, he made one last grab for control. "Before you head up," he said, casually blocking James with a hand, "there's something we should probably address." James turned slightly, patience thinning. Greg forced a thin smile. "We have strict dress code standards here, especially in the executive suites. Presentation matters. We set the tone." He waved vaguely at James's suit. "I'm guessing that's a synthetic blend, full-grain finish." James's eyes narrowed, but he let Greg continue. "For client-facing roles, we typically recommend wool or worsted, just so you know for next time. It's a formality, but it reflects on all of us." The young staffer shifted uncomfortably, but stayed silent. James nodded curtly. "Appreciate the fashion advice," he said flatly. "I'll be sure to consult you next time I dress for a board meeting." Greg's smile faltered but recovered. "Just trying to help," he said, stepping back as the elevator doors opened. "You're clear now, but next time, check in through proper channels to avoid confusion." James didn't reply. He stepped inside, his gaze locked forward. As the doors closed, he said, "The only confusion here is thinking you decide who belongs where." Greg stood in the hallway, staring at his reflection in the polished doors as they shut with a soft hiss. He thinks he won, James thought. The elevator climbing. They always do, until they don't. Greg's perspective. I'd been untouchable for years, running strategy at Sterling and Hart like a conductor with a perfect orchestra. That morning, I saw a black man in a suit and assumed he was out of place. It wasn't personal. It was instinct. This was my floor, my meeting, my world. I didn't question it. I acted. His calm defiance irritated me, like he was challenging my authority just by existing. I tore up his invitation, laughed it off, told myself I was protecting the room. Who does he think he is? I thought, smugly adjusting my cufflinks. Some consultant with a chip on his shoulder? The board would back me. They always did. Back in the lobby, Greg muttered to Teresa, "If anyone asks, he got in on a board directive. Nobody here cleared it." Teresa nodded faintly, her expression blank. Another elevator opened, and a young white man in his early 20s stepped out, blonde hair neatly parted, a messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He looked unsure but eager, a new hire desperate to prove himself. Teresa's face lit up. "Oh, hi. You're from the Triad Prep, right? They're expecting you upstairs," she said warmly. The young man blinked. "Yeah, I guess. The internship program." "Yup," she chirped. "Head right up. They'll seat you. No ID check, no delay, no dress code lecture." His wrinkled shirt and cheap polyester blazer were ignored. The contrast was stark. James, the lead consultant, scrutinized and mocked, while this intern, likely hired through a connection, was waved through without question. Upstairs, James exited the elevator, greeted by another assistant. "They're finishing setup," she said, smiling. "We'll bring you in after the opening remarks." He waited outside the glass-walled conference room, seeing the sleek interior, dark oak panels, custom leather chairs, digital projectors flashing quarterly reports. He also saw who was inside: board members, senior execs, department heads, and Greg striding in to claim a front-row seat. Moments later, the intern from the lobby entered, wide-eyed, waved to a seat beside Greg. "That's one of the new interns," someone whispered to the woman at the table's head. "Greg brought him in this morning. Sharp kid." James raised an eyebrow. No seat for him, no introduction, just silence. The glass felt more symbolic than physical now. "They're already rewriting the story," he thought, the old anger rising. "I'm still proving myself," while he's handed a chair. Greg leaned toward his assistant, Lena, a sharp woman in her mid-30s who seemed too smart for his nonsense but not bold enough to push back. He smirked, whispering loud enough for James to lip-read through the glass. "These people," Greg muttered, chuckling, "think a tailored suit and a briefcase make them one of us. It's almost cute." Lena shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the door, but said nothing. Greg sipped his coffee, smugly untouchable. Moments later, the assistant returned. "Mr. Carter, they're ready for you." James nodded, stepping inside as the door clicked shut, slicing through the room's polite murmur like a blade. A thin silence fell as heads turned, some curious, others wary, a few dismissive. Greg didn't stand or acknowledge him. "We were just discussing market volatility forecasts," Greg said to the room, ignoring James. "Hope, Zoyoung, hope our guest can keep up." James didn't flinch. He stepped forward, setting his briefcase on the table with precision and pulling out a single printed page, a formal invitation letter, signed and sealed by former CEO Robert Callahan. He handed it to Greg. "Here's the executive invitation," James said evenly. "Approved by Callahan and the Acquisitions Committee." Greg didn't reach for it. "That was before my time," he said dismissively. "Callahan's out. I call the shots now." James didn't blink. "Your board still operates under his charter," he replied. "Then this meeting was scheduled and approved by Legal, Finance, and Governance." Greg rolled his eyes, stood slowly, and took the letter as if it were beneath him. Then, with theatrical flair, he tore it in half, tossing the pieces onto the table. "I don't care who signed it," he said. "This is my floor, my meeting, and I decide who gets a seat." Gasps rippled through the room, quiet, sharp intakes of professionals witnessing recklessness. Even board members shifted uncomfortably, exchanging incredulous glances. Greg smiled, thinking he'd won. James's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "That was a legally binding document," he said. "You just destroyed official correspondence from your own corporate archives." Greg grinned. "What, you gonna sue me? File an HR complaint?" He leaned forward, his voice colder. "You don't belong here, Mr. Carter. The only reason you're still standing here is because no one's bothered to escort you out." The silence crackled. James scanned the table, noting the averted gazes, the sudden fascination with laptops and coffee cups. He nodded slowly, assessing. Then, with calm precision, he picked up the torn letter, folded it neatly, and slipped it back into his briefcase. "Thank you for confirming exactly what kind of culture this company has let fester," he said quietly. Greg chuckled. "Save the speeches. We have real work." "So do I," James replied, then turned and left without waiting for permission. Greg's perspective. I thought that was it. I'd put him in his place, and the room would move on. I sat back, adjusted my cufflinks, ready to steer the triad merger discussion. "He's nobody," I told myself. "Just another guy with a grudge and a cheap suit." I waved at the intern to take notes, smugly thinking he was more qualified to be here than Carter. The board seemed uneasy, but no one challenged me. I was untouchable, or so I thought. Victor Halpern, Senior VP of Operations, leaned to a colleague and whispered, "That was a bad look." I caught it and shrugged. "Relax, Victor. Nobody important saw." I kept going, laying out the triad proposal, confident the room was mine. But Lena slipped in, her face pale, and whispered something that hit like a freight train. "He's not just a consultant," she said. "He's the board's top appointee, overseeing the triad deal and all restructuring initiatives." My stomach dropped. "The board?" I stammered. "They've met with him," she confirmed. "He reports to Callahan's successor." Panic clawed at me, but I turned away, hiding it. How did I miss this? I thought, my mind racing. I just humiliated the new CEO. The conference room doors swung open, no knock, no whisper, just the deliberate sound of authority. James Carter walked in, no longer waiting, no longer proving. Beside him stood Eleanor Blackwood, chair of the Global Investment Council, a woman who could dismantle companies with a phone call. Silence gripped the room. "Good morning," Eleanor said crisply. "I hope we're not interrupting." Her voice carried weight Greg could never muster. "Greg," she said, turning to me, "we didn't expect you to be unaware." I forced a smile, my throat dry. "Chairwoman Blackwood, we weren't expecting—" She raised a hand, cutting me off. Some things are best delivered in person. She gestured to James. Allow me to introduce Mr. James Carter, newly appointed CEO of Sterling and Hart Enterprises, effective immediately. He's here to finalize the Triad acquisition and conduct a full audit and restructuring of senior leadership. The room froze. My marker hovered over the board, my half-finished chart now laughable. James surveyed the room, his voice steady. I was told this company needs someone to step in, assess the cracks, and shift its trajectory before more damage is done. That's exactly what I intend to do. Greg stammered. There's been some confusion. Earlier, I had a misunderstanding with Mr. Carter. My fault entirely. James's gaze locked on me, a quiet fire behind it. Greg, you spoke a lot today about who belongs in this room, who deserves a seat. There was no misunderstanding. You made it clear what you think of people like me. The only thing you didn't know was who I am. He pulled a sleek black folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. Let me reintroduce myself. I'm James Carter, appointed CEO of Worthington Capital Holdings, Sterling and Hart's parent company. Last week I finalized a $10 million reinvestment from Worthington, saving this company from forced restructuring. Gasps echoed. As part of that, he said, eyeing me, I was granted full authority to evaluate and restructure any executive I find misaligned with our values. My lips parted, but no sound came. James tapped the folder. Inside is the signed agreement, approved by legal and finance. The Triad deal is done. Funding is active. The board is informed. And your name, Greg, is flagged for performance and conduct review. My face paled. James, if I'd known who you were, I'd have shaken your hand, I tried. He cut me off, offered me coffee, pulled out a chair instead of calling security. You only respect what you recognize, and when you didn't, you showed exactly who you are. The room was silent. No one met my eyes. James addressed the table. What happened wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a reflection of a culture that lets bias masquerade as professionalism, arrogance as leadership, hierarchy over humanity. That ends today. Eleanor stepped forward. Mr. Carter's authority supersedes operational command during this transition. Full cooperation is expected. James took the head of the table where I'd stood minutes before and spoke with absolute clarity. I've heard enough. We don't need the rest of this meeting. The Triad deal is closed. Financials are ready. The leadership audit has been underway for weeks. He paused, eyeing me. I wasn't here to participate. I was here to observe and decide who stays and who doesn't. The room reeled. Joanna Green, a board member, shifted. Decide what exactly? James's gaze swept the table. Who's viable for the future and who's not? This isn't about vendettas. It's about culture and survival. He pointed to the screen, still showing my charts. You've seen the numbers. Sterling and Hart was on the brink last year. The only reason you're here drawing salaries is because someone stepped in and stopped the collapse. Victor cleared his throat. It's time they know, he said, turning to James. That someone wasn't just Worthington. It was you. Murmurs spread. James didn't just take this role last week, Victor said. He's been here, quietly orchestrating the $10 million bailout, restructuring debt, absorbing liabilities. He kept this company alive before you knew his name. James clicked a remote, pulling up a dashboard. executive performance reviews, turnover metrics, legal risk reports, data no one outside the inner circle should have accessed. "These are from 3 months of internal audits," he said. "Anonymous feedback, employee reviews, security footage. It shows exactly where leadership is failing." A graph appeared, my name at the top under Toxic Risk Index. The silence was suffocating. "I'm not here for theater," James said, "but I won't hide the truth. This is a recalibration. Anyone who's fostered hostility, ignored talent, or squandered opportunity will answer for it. Not because I say so, but because the data does." Joanna leaned forward. "What's next?" James scanned the room. "Change. Real, uncomfortable, necessary change. Some of you will adapt and rise. Others won't. Those who've used their titles to step on others will step aside." Eleanor stood. "Effective immediately. Gregory Sanders is suspended from all duties pending a formal review by the Corporate Ethics and Governance Committee. His system access will be revoked within the hour." Her voice was calm but final. I stood, grasping at pride, but no one looked at me. "You're not serious," I whispered, but I was already irrelevant. A security alert flashed on the monitor. My ID deactivated, my privileges erased in real time. A compliance officer approached. "You'll be escorted off the floor, sir," he said, firm but neutral. I grabbed my now worthless folder and followed, the door closing behind me with a thud. Greg's perspective. That moment broke me. I'd been king of that floor, untouchable, until James Carter walked in and exposed every crack in my armor. Escorted out, I felt the weight of every smirk, every dismissal I'd thrown at him. I wasn't just wrong, I was blind. The weeks that followed were a blur. I holed up in my apartment, replaying that day, hating myself. The board's review confirmed my violations: bias, abuse of power, ethical breaches. James could have publicly shamed me, but he didn't. He insisted I resign quietly, not to humiliate me, but to give me a chance to rebuild. Why? I kept asking. Why show mercy to someone who gave him none? James addressed the room. "For those who stayed silent while this culture festered, complicity isn't neutral. Accountability is now mandatory." He produced a second report, listing lower-level staff, Teresa, Kincaid, the 3 lobby laughers, tied to complaints previously ignored. "We've spoken to everyone involved," he said. "Reviewed footage, heard the tone, read transcripts. This company can either prop up ignorance or build integrity." Eleanor added, "The named receptionist and security staff have been terminated. HR processed their dismissals this morning. Their conduct didn't align with this company's values or future." Victor looked across the table. "You're serious?" "I have to be," James replied. "This isn't revenge. It's about protecting the people we want to build with, a culture where no one has to prove their worth to be treated with dignity." A final slide appeared, a mandatory leadership ethics program. "All management will undergo 3 weeks of training," James said. "Anonymous employee evaluations will determine promotions, raises, bonuses, even tenure. Not just results, but respect." No one challenged him. The ground had shifted. Downstairs, Teresa stood at her logged-out terminal, eyes wide, as HR handed her a termination letter. She stammered, claiming she'd done nothing illegal. But the evidence: ignored greetings, passive-aggressive dismissals, systemic assumptions, spoke louder. Kincaid was escorted out a side exit, muttering about protocol, unable to meet HR's gaze. Emails hit inboxes, review sessions scheduled, codes of conduct updated. Every executive knew power was no longer a shield. In the weeks that followed, the three lobby laughers faced private reviews, forced to account for their words. They kept their jobs, but carried the weight of their actions. Sterling and Hart's culture shifted irreversibly. James, now CEO, led with precision and presence, walking halls, attending staff meetings unannounced, asking hard questions. Promotions changed. Overlooked names rose. Talent no longer filtered through old biases. Training rooms buzzed with possibility. Employees seeing opportunity, free of assumptions. Greg's perspective, I didn't expect to change. After resigning, I fled Chicago, settling in a small Ohio town, trying to escape my shame. But James's mercy gnawed at me. He didn't destroy me. He gave me a chance to rebuild. I enrolled in a community leadership program, volunteering weekends to mentor at-risk teens. At first, it was just to fill the void, but their questions, their hunger for guidance, cracked something open in me. I saw myself in their struggles, the arrogance I'd once worn, the need to prove something. One night, a kid asked why I was there. I paused, my throat tight. Because I used to be the reason people like you got overlooked, I said. Now, I want to be the reason you're seen. Months later, I spoke at a youth entrepreneurship workshop teaching kids, mostly Black and Latino, how to pitch ideas, read investors, spot flaws in funding models. A shaky video of it went viral, not for the lesson, but for my closing line. I'm here because someone showed me I could be better. Now it's my turn to do the same. In a later interview, sitting on a park bench in a plain jacket, I looked older, humbler. I was arrogant, I admitted, my voice breaking. I thought power meant never being questioned. But James Carter didn't just change the company. He shattered the mirror I'd been lying to myself in. The reporter asked if I'd spoken to James. I nodded. He reached out, not to judge or gloat, but to ask how I was. He said if I was serious about change, he'd support me. I wiped my eyes. He didn't have to, but he did. That's when I realized I wasn't just a bad leader. I was a weak man. He gave me a chance to be neither. At Sterling and Hart, James's story became legend, not for PR, but as a reminder. People can change, and justice doesn't demand vengeance. Leadership builds, not burns. One evening, James stood at his office window, city lights glinting on the glass. He'd reshaped a company and a conversation. Across town, in a sweltering classroom, a man who once tried to erase him now helped a new James Carter find his voice. I'm not just fighting for me, James thought, his resolve unbroken. I'm fighting for them. If this story moved you, consider subscribing for more like it. What hit you hardest? The boardroom revelation, the final showdown, or Greg's redemption? Share your thoughts below and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your perspective.